Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So, I'm going to be talking about the oral histories of ordinary people who live and work in and around Art Deco structures. It's actually what I do every day of my life. I write a column on Bombay local history for midday, for Sunday midday specifically. And I'd just like to start by sharing something I really believe in, which is that every city in the world holds exceptional stories, but Bombay definitely more than most. And I think that's a function of two sets of circumstances. First, that wonderful thing that Bombay is, a city on the sea. And secondly, a working class city. And I think these two circumstances combine beautifully to create the most amazing, rich repertoire of stories, if we all care to listen to them, find them out, that kind of thing. So I'm going to start with an absolute hero who I discovered just a year ago. When I was writing about this building, Caretakers Chambers, it used to be called Ava Chambers. It's better known as the building that houses Mero's restaurant on its ground floor. Metro Cinema faces it. And it's a 5-story building with beautiful fluted columns going all the way up. And so many interesting people have lived and their families continue to live in Ava Chambers, in Caretakers Chambers, including Shavak Chawda, the contemporary Indian painter. His Bharatanatyam dancer daughter Jaru lives there. They have given me stories, their family histories. I met Keki Punjaji there, whose ancestors started this very amazing pickles and chutney company called Punjaji and Company. So lots of entrepreneurial and artistic talents lived here. But the person I really want to introduce you to is Rizwan Khan. He's the panwala who owns, as you can see, NK Pan Shop. He's a third generation panwala who has plied his trade at this spot. And he has an incredible, very beautiful sense of appreciation of the building in whose shadow, at whose feet he works. And he put me in touch with his father. COVID was going on last year. I spoke to his father in Azamgarh in UP. And his father, Nausher Khan, that is why NK, Nausher Khan, told me, I can give you a family history, but I think you should write about my building. So I said, yes, I'll write about both. And he just wouldn't give me much about how he started or anything. He just kept saying, सबको बता दीजिए, बार बार देखो हमारी सुंदर इमारत को, गौर से देखो, बार बार देखो, फिर से देखो, और बस देखते रहना. Now, I found that quite amazing because this is someone who doesn't have any formal language to describe that this is Art Deco, these are fluted columns, when it was built. He did know that it came up in the same year that Metro came up. That was quite exceptional also, 1938, both buildings. And he had his own little set of observations about hierarchy. He said in the early days when Metro showed Angrezi film, though the clientele was very different, people came to my stall and didn't spit around. Then I get a lot of Tapori type characters once it became more Hindi films than English films, at which point his father said, no, we mustn't be snobby like that. Now everything, Bombay is the great leveler. It doesn't matter what language of film, cinema has its own language. So they had an incredible conversation, father and son, and this is on the line from Azamgarh. So I was really quite taken up by Rizwan Khan and his father, Nausher Khan, and it was their grandfather, I have to look up the name, Dost Mohammad Khan from UP, who set it up in the early 1950s. The grandson still sits here. Right across, we all know this, Metro House, Javeri Brothers. It's everyone's, at some point, silver shop, not only for silver coins, but also for commemorative trophies and shields. And this was, if you look at it even now, the entrance, the handles of the door are shaped like Mont Blanc fountain pens, with their nibs pointing upward. And that's because this little runaway boy called Shamdas Javeri, who founded this store, he was a runaway from Bhavnagar, orphaned at 5, 5 years down the line, he comes to Bombay with just 2 rupees rattling in his raggedy kind of shirt pocket. He apprentices at a small Crawford Market stall. That's not him, that's someone standing with the Mont Blanc van. But he sets up this shop here and has vision enough for a runaway child to start importing in 1966 Mont Blanc as a luxury brand. And that's the van. It's a 1950s Ford Prefect van. It says Mont Blanc there. But the idea is lots of details that we miss passing metro and buildings like that every other day. Do check out the fountain pen shaped, Mont Blanc fountain pen shaped door handles. They're still there. No, I don't have a close-up, but they're there. Okay, this is Shireen Mansion, Tardev, at the entrance of Gamadia Colony. The detail I'd like to share is this one. Just below the very Art Deco lettering of the name, Shireen Mansion, is this ship, beautiful ship, plump sails, and as Mustansir said, of course, earlier, that the obvious explanation would be that nautical images were very much a part of deco design, and the trend was, this was also a 1938 built building, and it was pre-independence architects are toying with non-colonial design, and ships, trains, planes, representing travel, speed, the surge to hit new horizons, to travel beyond the Arabian Sea, embellishes a lot of the exteriors of new structures. But the story I like to talk about is, it comes from Shireen Mansion itself. Why the ship? The original landlord was a gentleman called Barjorji Besania, and his trade involved transporting bales of hay and grass between the 7 islands. And so he decided that Shireen Mansion had to have this solitary boatman as the motif to illustrate the name. Still Midtown. The image on the right is Silver Foil. Silver Foil and Gold Cornet are 2 buildings whose names rather intrigued me for years. They're just round the corner from where I live at Gamadia Road. Gamadia Road is the lane connecting Pedder Road and Warden Road. And I thought one day I would get to the heart of why they're called what they are. So, first of all, with projecting balconies, the continuous chhajjas, again, exemplifies the appeal of reinforced concrete, RCC as a rampantly explored material of the 1930s. And Silver Foil and Gold Cornet have just a low wall separating them. They were both built by the Sonawala brothers, Ghulam Hussain Sonawala and Wali Muhammad Sonawala. And why the names? So Wali Muhammad was the president of the Gold Association, with an office in Zaveri Bazaar where deals in silver and gold are struck, of course. And he decided he wanted silver foil, or the varak, the silver leaf, to christen his building. Now, his brother Ghulam Hussain decided to follow what their father said. Their father said some gold should be represented in the other building. And so Gold Cornet. And their father was Haji Allah Rakhya, who imported platinum into India. So Haji Allah Rakhya, since Srila, you've talked so much about platinum, Haji Allah Rakhya's sons, Wali Muhammad and Ghulam Hussain, in the gold trade, in Zaveri Bazaar, decide that their pride and joy buildings should be Silver Foil, which is on the right. I'm sorry, I don't have Gold Cornet. But to the left is also very Art Deco, facing them, Karimboy Manor. Okay. There's the detail. This kind of jagged metal lettering straddling the word Silver Foil. It's a very stylized lightning bolt kind of design, in a kind of a suggestive of an electric nameplate. Both these images, the Silver Foil building as well as the detail, are courtesy Art Deco Mumbai. Wherever I haven't mentioned someone else, the images are all courtesy Midday Infomedia. Okay, coming to intriguing names. So I think it was Mustansir who showed Sunshine. Did you? Yeah. So I have deliberately got a shot of the buildings, of between the buildings. To the left is moonlight, right is sunshine. And that's because they were built by the same owner I'll explain who the people are in the foreground. And Moonlight and Sunshine are pretty enough names, but they have quite a lovely story of origin here. So they were both built by G.B. Matre, both in 1938. First Sunshine was completed, then came Moonlight. And Katie Engineer, the lady in the blue kurti standing in the foreground, she told me how her grandfather built the buildings and why he named them what he did. So her father was Firoz Shah Mistry, and he had his family's flagging fortunes sort of forced him to educate himself by street light, and the sight of this young boy reading under the road lamps really moved textile tycoon Morarji Gokuldas. So he took on Firoz Shah as an apprentice, and Firoz Shah went on then to form a company called Firoz Shah and Motorboy. And with Japanese technology, with all the textile background he had trained with thanks to Morarji Gokuldas, Firoz Shah starts manufacturing sun and moon brand machine bobbins. And because they did really well with the imported technology, he decided he would lavish his buildings, Moonlight and Sunshine, named after the bobbin success story. And he very indulgently laid them with fine Italian marble and the works. Standing next to Katie is her cousin, also Firoz Shah Mistry's grandson, Pervez Mistry, who some of us know as the country's pioneer karate exponent. So Sansei Pervez Mistry. He qualified in Kyoto, returned in 1969 as India's first black belt, and teaches generations of students, who he remembers even after half a century. My brother went to him as one of his earlier pupils, and he still remembers him, as all good teachers do. This is closer to where I grew up. It's an Art Deco bungalow called Westview at the corner, at the entrance of Ice Factory Lane. Of course, it's a horrible kind of appendage of a mall today. But it was I don't have a very clear picture of just the bungalow. The family was only able to give me this. But just off Hill Road. Yeah, so it's just off Hill Road, Ice Factory Lane. I grew up in an Art Deco building without knowing it was an Art Deco building, just fronting Westview. This is the bungalow. My dad's sister lived there, so we were in and out of the house. And of course, it has the bandings, it has the chajjas, it has lovely stained glass and gate grills with sunburst designs. But it had a very lovely garden, a sprawling garden with palm trees and curry patta plants. And my mom would send me, it was my task every Saturday mid-morning to pick fresh curry patta for our prawn curry lunch. So I would go there, and I was a little afraid of stepping into the garden because, and this is a funny story, Westview was full of animals owned by Shirin Bai Hormazdi, this Irani landlady. She kept a whole brood of animals, including a pet leopard. A pet leopard called Tiger for some inexplicable reason. And he, of course, among his companions were a parrot who would cuss away with the worst Gujarati swear words, Parsi Gujarati swear words, worse than any other. And there were two monkeys. The pet monkeys were named Tarabai and Sitaram by the household staff. By the household staff. And every time the parrot cussed in really crude Gujarati, Tarabai and Sitaram would chitter away. They would be very amused. They couldn't figure, I'm sure, but they just realized that this was taboo because of everyone's reaction. So not only was the leopard cub confusingly called Tiger, but down on the ground floor where my aunt lived, her pet dog was Tiger. And every time Shirin Bai called out Tiger to the leopard, both big cat and small would let up a roar. So you can understand why I didn't particularly want going curry patta picking into that compound. But, and this is the loveliest animal story that comes from that family, they had a boisterous baby elephant who lived, he couldn't have lived there. He lived in the family's Daisar farmhouse. I forget his name. He did have a name, I forget. And when he came, he was very exuberant. He would come to visit the family. And he seriously thought he could chase, if not race, the cars on Hill Road. So there he would be sort of frisking along behind the cars. And they actually had the temerity to send him for auditioning for the film Hathi Mere Sathi. And he was just too unruly. He was too unruly, just not mild enough to be trained to emote. So, of course, he didn't get the role. And Iranis were very, very indignant. The film will be a flop, taddan, hopeless film, they said. Of course, it did no such thing. It became a runaway hit, at which point they just decided it was the fault of the elephant and nothing to do with the film. So that's West U. Beautiful. No, no. It was a huge, see, there was one flat on the ground floor, huge, cavernous kind of bungalow. And the Hormuzdi family lived on the first floor, so the animals had the run of the place. And my aunt was an animal lover, so it was only her. And when neighbors got really frightened about the leopard, Shirin Bhai would say, if you must worry about that mean small dog. He's much meaner than my tiger, she would say. So it was very amusing growing up with all of this. Okay, going further into the suburbs, and this is the point I'd love to make. South Bombay, beautiful Art Deco, has been documented, has been awarded, great. But there's Art Deco across the city. It's staring us in the face. We're just so busy avoiding potholed, roads and just feeling our way around, navigating it, that we don't look up. I was profiling the last 6, this is Santa Cruz, near the Willingdon Catholic Gymkhana. And I was profiling the last 6 Catholic cottages left standing. And I came upon the house of Ronald Jeffries, that's Ronald Jeffries. Sun-kissed, K-I-S-T, facing east. So sun kisses it very early in the morning. And I just went cold calling. I didn't know him at all. I rang the doorbell and he opened and told me his story. So there he is, fronting his porch, and the porch is, you can't see it from, but it's receded way inside from the road, way inside from the lane. And it struck me as unusual. I decided I would ask him about it. And when I did, he told me about his grandfather, Frank Thomas, who built Sunkist in 1939. Frank Thomas was a railways man. He decided he wanted to locate his bungalow squarely between Car Station and Santa Cruz Station, so that wherever he looked out from, he would look at his beloved engines. He was a railways man, BBM, CI, Bombay, Baroda, and Central India Railway. So he's about to start constructing his cottage. And there's a lady he doesn't know at all, a neighbor, who says, please, I have a request. Don't build so that you obstruct my view of my Gymkhana, of Willingdon Catholic Gymkhana. And it sounds incredible, but he actually listened. He set his building way in, the cottage way in. And I think that speaks volumes of the kind of courtesy and civility which wasn't quite extinct then. And Ronald told me there was such great understanding between people. My grandfather didn't think it was at all unusual or, not possible to, accede to her request. So there is a lovely story, I think, of how neighbors respected each other's surroundings, viewpoints, then got subsequently closed. He didn't know this lady at all. And I also noticed that the grills, the window grills, along with the sunburst and all of the other little deco elements, because he was so proud that he could build his own house, Frank Thomas has his initials, and they're still there, woven into the grill. So on the inside, you can see FTJ, Frank Thomas Jeffries. And on the outside, it's stylized to read JEF, the same set of initials carved very expertly. From outside, it's JEF for Jeffries. From inside, it's FTJ. You have to see it to realize how pretty, how beautiful a detail that is. So that's the story of Sunkist, Santa Cruz. This is a before picture of a bungalow in Vileparle called Archana. I'll just show you the next and then go back to this one. This is the renovated Archana. This is a story I found just last week, in fact. So Archana is the only such Art Deco bungalow left standing in a lane called Lajpat Rai Road in Vileparle, West Vileparle. And on the top floor, the second floor is the owner, a gentleman called Bhanubhai Desai. But the interesting people are the tenants on the first floor and ground floor. They own both. They are first rented first and ground floor, and now they've just purchased it. And 10 years ago, This is a story told to me by Pushkar Shah. So Pushkar Shah's family occupy the ground floor and the first floor. Pushkar Shah's grandfather, Manilal Shah, came to Bombay from a village near Idar in Gujarat. At first he was a professor. Then he decided he wanted to get a little more entrepreneurial than academic. He founded a chemicals business called DEC Chemicals, which Pushkar is the third generation running it. So rather than 10 years ago, rather than go the way of wanting to modernize and innovate, the Shah family consults conservation architect Vikas Gulabri and wants to be truthful and respectful of the original elements of the building. And I'm sorry, this is just a shot that they were not in town. The gardener shot this for me. I wasn't able to get it, but it's a beautifully restored bungalow, and I just think it speaks volumes of the importance of being emotionally invested in an aesthetic. They don't own the building. The owners are on the top floor, but they decided to take up this challenging task with the very happy permission of the owner of the Desai family. And I asked Vikas what were the challenges here. And he says, well, in the absence of old photographs and with certain, layer upon layer of construction changes over the years previously made, staircase windows, it was very difficult to see where to begin renovating. But because of the persistence of this very sensitive family, Pushkar Shah's family, he managed, and he decided he could save some in situ mosaic floorings inside, along with handrail embellishments. So I just think that's a very lovely example of what can be done, even if it is not your own building. Just a kind of aesthetic sensibility and a responsibility to the neighborhood you live in and what you enjoy. All the other bungalows are renovated and their buildings. Archana is the only one left on Lajpat Rai Road. I just feel it's a kind of effort which needs a little replication. And if even two people do that in every lane, the city is going to look very different. It's just a whole new lease of life to a deco gem. This is Suleiman Chambers on Battery Street. So Battery Street is basically just behind and left of the Regal. We're back in South Bombay. And in the picture are the Vakil family. Well, the couple and their grandson, Rustam and Shanaz Vakil and their grandson. The Vakils opened me up to visiting a whole lot of neighbors to get the stories of Suleiman Chambers and the other buildings in this lane. It's the Gordon House Hotel lane. The lady on the right is Banu Kalantri, and that's a lovely Irani restaurant story I found there. Her father was Khoda Murad Mehban Afgham. He fled to Bombay as a 15-year-old peasant lad from Yazd. And he traveled on muleback until he could reach some kind of train, and then he got to Bombay. Started by sweeping the floors of the restaurant he then grew to own. That's New Majestic restaurant near Capitol Cinema. So he starts sweeping the floors for 5 rupees a day, ends up a partner at the cafe. So Banu Aunty Kalantri is very proud of this story. And so this is on Battery Street. Why Battery Street? Again, that story came from Suleiman Chambers. So it refers to the defunct saluting battery, which is on this stretch. And a black stone slab at the entrance of Suleiman Chambers, I could still see drilled with large holes, indicating where possibly some guns were bolted in position in the days when the battery was there. The battery subsequently moved a little further down. It's now the Navy's Middle Ground Island Battery, set up on a basalt rock reef, just a little seaward of the gateway. And a lot happened in Suleiman Chambers. Every building is interesting, but Suleiman Chambers was like worthy of a whole column in itself. But I decided to just take what was really important. And it has, right from the mid-70s, it has a little library that still functions for some of us journalists who know it as CED, Center for Education and Documentation, on the ground floor. It was a post-emergency hub and center point for civil liberties and press activists. And it soldiers on quietly unknown. Do visit it. Do patronize it. Places like this really need our support. Some people are not even aware CED is still around. It's very much around. And in flat number 31, of Suleiman Chambers comes what some of us do remember as a kind of a music revolution. This is this band called the Jets. And the Jets were 4 Colaba boys. They wanted to be Bombay's version of the Beatles in the mid-60s. So 3 Campion boys and a St. Marian burst on the beat scene. And on lead, rhythm, and bass guitar, you can see here, are Michael Kirby, Malcolm Mazumdar, and Suresh Bhojwani. Suresh is extreme right, with their drummer, Napoleon Braganza. And they played at the Ambassador, they played at the Taj, they played at Sun and Sand, and they practiced in flat number 31, which is occupied today by the gentleman who was their manager, Ashok Daryanani, who still stays there. So Ashok shared this photograph with me. And they were only there for 3 years, but they were quite the sensation, 64 to 66. And as they're practicing in flat number 31 of Suleiman Chambers, they were often joined by a Colaba boy who went on to become a Nashville country singer. So this is Rolly Daniels, Jabalpur born, Dublin bred, ends up in Bombay for a little while, and then goes on to become a Nashville country singer. So Rolly Daniels joined this quartet quite often when they were practicing. So the Jets were only around for 3 years, but in 2009, they had a single night sellout show at the Blue Frog. And they came in, all 4 of them came in from across the world, some from New Zealand, Australia, Canada, where they're settled now. And it was quite something. I'm told I wasn't able to go there. That's the Jets, flat number 31. A lot of music history there as well. Okay, this is not strictly about an Art Deco building, but about an Art Deco sculptor. So this is the Shivaji Park statue. And in the extreme right, you can see just near Shivaji's left shoulder is N.G. Pansari, the deco designer, who is known for really striking buildings like the Assurance building at Fort. A lot of insurance buildings he built, which I think Mustansir pointed out, the classical figures on the main facade, that was his. And this was one of his most career-defining public art sculptures. He is commissioned, but this is a sad story. It's got a little bit of a sad history here. We pass this statue every day, but here's the story behind it. So, Pansari is seen perched on the scaffolding here as he's surveying the scale on which he has mounted this monument. And I found this great description in Shanta Gokhale's book on Shivaji Park of how the 30-piece bronze is said to have taken a mental and emotional toll on Pansari. And the sequence of events goes that he worked on assembling this. It's a 30-piece sculpture. He initially assembled it in the backyard of his Bandra home, which also doubled as a foundry. And the first model was rejected. It was found to be dwarfed by the sheer vast expanse of Shivaji Park. So they said it needed to be at least 22 feet tall, the politicians of the day told Pansari. And that statue initially had been crowdfunded by the public. Suddenly he's asked to scale up, and no money was forthcoming. People refused to, they could give him directive, but no help, no support. So he's a broken man, he doesn't know how to do this. And sheer integrity makes him feel that when no more money is seen coming in, he saddles the responsibility of his commission, and he works with personal funds. That reportedly led to him getting ill, and he ended a broken man considerably because of this statue. So how a piece of public art that I have a very sweet next slide. That's Kiran Pansari, N.G. Pansari's son, working on a little, you can see all his implements and paints and construction material there. And he's touching up his father's famous bronze statue in 1966, just before the head is placed to crown the statue. But his father certainly had to pay dearly. It was a real burden for him to bear alone, something that it's worth thinking about. So, that's it. A lot of these stories are in this book. And thank you.